Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Library Greenville Chautauqua Talk. Tonight, we would like to welcome everyone and invite you to silence your cell phones so they're not going off during the presentation. I will mention that I would normally pull out my cell phone and demonstrate how that's done for those who've never actually turned their cell phones off, but I left mine at home. It was funny. I walked into the library and went, where's my cell phone? It was a hollow, lost feeling not having a cell phone. We want to thank the Greenville County Library for sponsoring this event. Please notice that back on the table in the back, there are materials from here at the Greenville Library that will tell you about Hemingway, our subject for tonight. And I would like to point out that you have the ability, if you don't have your library card with you, and you have a library card, they can use, I believe, your license, your driver's license, in lieu of the library card. But if you don't have a library card at all, they can sign you up for one while you're here. And who doesn't want to have a library card? I mean, that's just one of the best things. All right. The Chautauqua has a lot of volunteers. If you saw the folks waiting over there helping out people as they came in, there's a role for lots of volunteers and lots of different jobs around Chautauqua during the shows, during the festivals, and we invite everyone to get involved. If you have opportunities to help out, then you can go online and find out more about volunteering. Lots of odd jobs. But one of the things that several of you heard about tonight is that we're trying to spread the word, not only about the February event, but also coming up for June when we have, 12 days of Chautauqua here in Greenville, one of the longest and biggest Chautauqua festivals in the country, Oklahoma Beat Us. They go for a full month, traveling from city to city. That's not fair. Anyway, they could always use volunteers to help things get along. And, of course, we will have upcoming free event flyers, and encourage your friends. As I think you heard Laura saying earlier, the largest percentage of people who come to these sessions come to our shows, whether they're at the library or under the tent or in one of the local theaters. They come because a friend has told them about Chautauqua. And so just spread the word. That's a big help. Even though we've been here for over 25 years, we still have people, what are you doing next week? Oh, I'm going to catch the Chautauqua show. And they say, exactly. This is not just in Greenville, South Carolina. I was in Nevada a month ago with a Chautauqua there in Boulder City, Nevada. They actually printed a T-shirt that said, "What the Chautauqua?" because they always got those comments. Anyway, so with that all said, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for tonight. Before retiring from his teaching position 3 years ago, tonight's speaker was the chair of the English department at Wofford College in Spartanburg. He taught literature, including a course on Fitzgerald and Hemingway. He taught composition and creative writing, and he served as the director of the Writing Center. He is the author of the novel Messenger from Mystery. He has written a memoir telling the story of Greeks in upstate South Carolina, and he has also written 2 books of poetry. He has won 5 South Carolina Fiction Project prizes and a South Carolina Individual Artist Grant. In retirement now, he still teaches American novels, including The Sun Also Rises and Farewell to Arms, both, just in case you don't know, by Hemingway, and as part of the lifelong learning program at Wofford College. And so tonight, he will be presenting his knowledge of Hemingway to all of you, and he will come up here having, like the subject that Hemingway himself spoke about, wrote about, a gentleman who has actually run with the bulls in Pamplona. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Dino Trachis. Right over there.
Thank you. That was very nice. Thank you. Okay, let's see. The mic working? Can you hear me? Yes. Great, great, great. Okay. I was going to say all of the things that you just heard about Chautauqua and how wonderful it is and how we want you to spread the word and we want you to get a library card and all of those things, all those good things. So, ditto. And I was going to tell you to silence your cell phones. So, okay. Tonight, as I talk, we will have some video images on the screen here, and we'll start those in a minute. And they come from a documentary called Wrestling with Life, which is available. Anybody can Google it and find it. You just look for Hemingway, YouTube, Wrestling with Life. Some combination of those things will get you to the YouTube. And you can see this hour-long biographical documentary of Ernest Hemingway. Or, even better, if you are a contributor to PBS, you can get the very fine Ken Burns and Lynn Novick 3-part documentary about Hemingway. It's very good, as everything by Ken Burns is good, I think. But anyway, the video that you'll see tonight, and by the way, I'll be showing the video, but the audio will be turned off because I want you to listen to me. So we'll show you, I'm doing it, I do it this way just to help to entertain you so that you don't just look at me. Why would you do that? So you'll see images of Hemingway's life real before you, beginning with his life as a child, a little boy who's dressed like a girl because his mother did that. She dressed him and his sister alike, sometimes as girls, sometimes as boys. And then you'll see famous people, you'll see critics and authors, famous authors. You'll see the Fitzgeralds, for example, and so on. You'll see the people in Hemingway's life. You'll see all 4 of his wives. You'll see Mariel Hemingway, his granddaughter, who in fact is the narrator of this documentary. And you'll see other people as well. And usually on the video, there's the name of the character on screen is there, and it tells you not only the name, but who it is. But if you have any questions about that, you can ask me after the talk, and I'll be glad to try to answer. Who was that person who looked like, and so on and so forth. For example, one of the critics, Hotchner, has a book on the table back there. Although many others, of course, were not there. There's so many Hemingway books, and the library can't possibly hold them all. Wouldn't want to. Okay. I don't have time, of course, to talk at length about all of Hemingway's books. So I'm going to just mention them and tell you which ones I think are most important. And then I'm going to zero in on the two best. Okay? Hemingway's career began in 1924 when he published in Paris a slim little volume called In Our Time. It was just vignettes. And then the year later, he published a version in the United States called In Our Time. You can distinguish the two because one isn't capitalized and the other is, which is just a silly thing. But anyway, he began with those little things. He was not known well at all. He had very little publication, and that's how he started, and in Paris. Then in 1926, he published The Sun Also Rises, his first novel. In 1927, he published a book of short stories called Men Without Women. In 1929, he published A Farewell to Arms. So you see that Hemingway's first two novels, Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms, were published 3 years apart in the 20s when he was in his 30s or hadn't even reached 30 yet. So he was a young writer for these two novels, and he was a good writer. He was at his best, I think, in these two novels. He went from there to publish a book called Death in the Afternoon in 1932, which is about bullfighting. And it's not exactly a novel. It's a story told by a man, a bullfight aficionado, to an old woman, which is kind of odd. But it's very interesting if you have interest in bullfighting. I recommend it to you because, for one thing, it has fabulous photographs of all the great Spanish matadors. And some of them, some of these photos, if you excuse me, capture the moment when the bull gores the matador. And it's shocking, powerful. But they also show the beauty of the bullfight. And that was Hemingway's intention, was to show what charmed him about bullfighting, because he really did love the bullfights. In 1933, he published another book of short stories, Winter Take Nothing. In 1935, he published a book called Green Hills of Africa, which was about big game hunting, which he did that too. In 1937, he published a novel called To Have and Have Not, which was about searching for U-boats in the Caribbean during World War II, which is something that Hemingway sort of did. It wasn't really serious. If he had found one, he wouldn't have known what to do with it. They would have probably blown him up, blown him apart. But anyway, in 1938, he published the fifth column and the first 49 stories, so another book of short stories primarily. And then in 1940, he published another important novel, For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is about the Spanish Civil War. But that's 1940, so that's, since 1929, he hasn't published a good novel. It's been a while, but this one was a huge bestseller, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Sold even better than Farewell to Arms and Sun Also Rises. Was made into a big major motion picture with Gary Cooper playing the lead role of Robert Jordan. By the way, I saw recently that a little clip of John McCain, Senator John McCain, talking about Robert Jordan, the main character of that novel, saying, "That man, Robert Jordan, he was my hero." Excuse me. Anyway, in 1950, 10 years later, he published a book called Across the River and Into the Trees, which you might be interested in if you are interested in a man who's like a former soldier who's in his 50s, and he's having an affair with a beautiful young 18-year-old woman who's an Italian heiress. That's what that's about. In 1952, he sort of out of nowhere, he published The Old Man and the Sea. Came out of nowhere because we had no preparation for it in his other work up to then. But in fact, Hemingway was a fisherman all of his life, and including a deep sea fisherman as the character in The Old Man and the Sea. A small novel, a novel that I love, a novel that the Spanish critic Mario Vargas Llosa calls una obra perfecta, a perfect work, he said. And many people admire The Old Man and the Sea like that. That's it. The rest of them, there are 3 more novels, but they were all published posthumously. One is A Movable Feast, which is a memoir about his early years in Paris with Hadley. Then Islands in the Stream, which is about a painter who goes deep sea fishing in the Caribbean. And finally, Garden of Eden, which is a book about a young couple, a young, lovely couple who are experimenting with androgyny, in that the woman wants to be the man's boy, and however that works. And it's a very odd book, and it wasn't published, and Hemingway would probably be embarrassed to know that it now has been published anyway. But if that's interesting to you, there it is. In my mind, the four most important books, and if you want to read Hemingway, this is where you start with these four. They are the first book, Sun Also Rises, the second, A Farewell to Arms, the third, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and fourth, The Old Man and the Sea. If you read those, you will have read pretty much a representation of all of Hemingway's career. You can call yourself a Hemingway scholar, and I'll back you up. Now, does anyone know why I'm dressed the way I am? The what? The bullfights, the Encierro, the bullfights in Pamplona, Spain. You see here a picture of the bullfights in Pamplona, Spain. That's what it looks like. You might notice that that's me. And standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder, looking back with a little bit of fear in his eyes, is my son-in-law. And he's looking back because there's a bull back here that looks like he's coming right for us. Anyway, so I went to Pamplona, and I didn't exactly run with the bulls. I sort of ran along the fence to be away from them. And this is not exactly what Hemingway meant when he said in a letter to Fitzgerald that courage is grace under pressure. That's not grace under pressure. Okay. But nevertheless, it's a fascinating thing to do. Has anybody done it? Has anybody? You have? How about that? What's your name? William? William Spain. It's nice to meet you. Did you like it? Enjoy the time? Good, good. This fiesta is like Mardi Gras. It's mostly a party that lasts a week, except that in Pamplona, at 8 o'clock in the morning, bulls run in the streets. Only for about 5 minutes. And you have to pick your spot and so on, and they'll come thundering through the cobblestone street, and then they flow into the bull ring, and there are bullfights that day, and you'll get to see the bullfights. Hemingway went to Pamplona many times not to run with the bulls. He didn't do that, although he probably claimed that he did at one time. His grandson said to me in a letter, I wrote a little bit, I wrote a few emails and letters to his grandson. He said, yeah, like so much of what my grandfather wrote, there was a lot of bull in his, in his dispatches about the bullfights in Pamplona. Anyway, okay, now we're going to run the video now. And you'll see I hope we'll run the video. We'll see. Get it? There he is. And you, I don't know what you think, but most people thought that Hemingway was a very good-looking man for most of his life, especially as a young man. But these are pictures. Jack Perkins, the narrator, the host of this program. But he'll introduce Mariel Hemingway in just a minute, and you'll see her. and then you'll start seeing images of, there's Mariel, and you see that it's got a label for you, okay? But she's great. She narrates this whole video. You will see, as I said, all of the characters and so on, and they'll come up and they'll be labeled for you. I'm getting my pages mixed up. Hemingway was born and raised, there he is, and you'll see a picture of him like a little girl there, in the prosperous town of Oak Park, Illinois, a town with wide lawns and narrow minds, Hemingway said. His mother dressed him and his sister alike, sometimes like boys, sometimes like girls. And I mention this curious fact because all the biographers mention it, in part because Hemingway was fascinated with androgyny, with male and female characteristics, a combination of those. And for example, in The Sun Also Rises, the lovely, alluring Brett Ashley, the heroine of the novel, is a 34-year-old, a very attractive woman who's voluptuous, and yet she wears her hair cut very short like a boy, which they all make a point of because it's so unusual in 1923, 24 for a woman to dress that way. Although the men all thought she was beautiful, and so it worked. And in fact, it's sort of mentioned in the book that Brett was the first to do that. She was sort of a trendsetter. There you see one of his sons, Gregory, who comes on several times anyway, the children of Hemingway are interesting, and many of the biographies talk about the children. Hemingway was not a very good father. When he wanted to be, he could be, and when he dedicated time to his sons, he was a good father. They loved him, but he was absent a lot because he was off doing this and that and writing and so on. That's his mother, Grace. That's the family. There's his father, Clarence, who was a doctor and an outdoorsman. These two people look happy, Hemingway disliked them. Hemingway liked his father, that's his father, liked the outdoorsman aspect of his father, and his father taught him to hunt, took him out into the woods, and they had a little shack like this where they would go out and live in the summers and fish, hunt and fish and so on. But his mother was an overbearing, dominant, he thought she was a bitch. Excuse that word, but it comes back. It comes back. Hemingway uses that word a lot, not only about his mother, but as for some of the characters as well. He was a good-looking, athletic boy who also played the cello, and he wrote for the school paper, and he was obviously a good writer from early on, and including in high school. Before he got started as a novelist, he wrote for the Kansas City Star newspapers. Uncle got him that job. And they had a style sheet that taught him that said, use simple words, short sentences, short first paragraphs, and vigorous English. And that's the way to write. And Hemingway took that to heart, and it became part of the famous style that is the infectious style of Ernest Hemingway. In 1917, the United States entered World War I. Hemingway wanted adventure, wanted to go, but his parents wouldn't let him. They wanted him to go to college. He didn't want to go to college. So he worked for a year, again in journalism, and at 18, he joined the Army. Although it wasn't the U.S. Army, he couldn't be a regular soldier because his eyesight wasn't good. But he joined the Red Cross Ambulance Corps, and they sent him to Italy, where he was on the front lines of the battle between the Italians and the Germans and Austrians. That was the war, World War I. Okay? He was there for just a couple of weeks, and he was up handing out chocolate to the soldiers on the front lines when a mortar exploded right near him. And he was wounded severely. He had 220 wounds, mortar shrapnel wounds in his legs, as well as a machine gun bullet hit him in the knee. So he was fairly seriously wounded. They took him to a hospital in Milan, where he recuperated and where he met the American nurse Agnes von Kurowski, who was 28 years old, 10 years older than he. She was beautiful and flirtatious. You will see a picture of her soon, I think, on here. She's, anyway. And they fell in love, or at least he certainly fell in love with her. And she treated him, took care of him, and then when he was sent home to Oak Park, a month or so later, because he was in the hospital for a good long while, she wrote him a letter saying, "Dear kid, I'm sorry, you're not going to like this, but I've decided that we can't do this. We can't get married. I'm too old for you, and I'm already engaged to someone else, by the way." And so anyway, but he was devastated. So what did he do? There he is. There's the fighting in World War I, the front. He goes home. He's at home in Oak Park, and he just kind of lies around the house, brokenhearted. Finally, his mother kicks him out of the house. She says, "I'm tired of you lying around, moping, whining about some girl and so on," and so she kicks him out. So he goes to Toronto and he continues to work on journalism. He meets Hadley Richardson. 6 weeks later, they get married. He also meets another writer named Sherwood Anderson. Sherwood Anderson is the author of a book called Winesburg, Ohio. And it was a well-respected book of short stories that were connected, so it was kind of a novel in the form of short stories. Sherwood Anderson liked Hemingway and gave him good advice. There's Agnes, his girlfriend, nurse. Sherwood Anderson said, "Hemingway, you should go to Paris. That's where things are happening. That's really the hot spot for literature today in the world. Go to Paris. And I will write you some letters to my friends." And so Hemingway said, "That sounds good." And Hadley had some money. That Hadley and Hemingway got married. I forgot to mention that. And Hadley had some inheritance because her mother had died recently. And so they used her money and whatever little money Hemingway had made as a journalist and went to Paris and took the letter. He took his letters from Sherwood Anderson and gave them to Ezra Pound and Gertrude Stein and others, Sylvia Beach, who had a bookstore in Paris. And they all took care of him. They liked him. He was a young, handsome, personable young man. And they took him in and they helped him. And they also taught him about writing. Gertrude Stein told him to write one true sentence. And Ezra Pound taught him to make it new, which was one of his slogans. And Hemingway started to become the writer that we know of today. Jake Barnes, who is the Hemingway of The Sun Also Rises. How many of you have read Sun Also Rises? Good, yeah, a dozen of you, great. Jake Barnes is modeled on Hemingway. And we know this in part because if you look at the manuscripts, the handwritten manuscripts of The Sun Also Rises, you see that the main character's name is Hem, H-E-M. Until later, when he changed all the names, the other names of the characters were also, other characters were named after the real people who were Hemingway's friends. He was writing about all of his friends in that book. The book is, we refer to that kind of book as a roman à clé, which means a book with a key. And it means if you know the key, if you have the key, and the key is these are all real people, and if you know who they are, then you have some insight into the story. So that's what he was writing. The plot is fairly simple. To borrow the title of my favorite book about Hemingway, Everybody Behaves Badly. That's pretty much the plot of The Sun Also Rises. It's about mostly expatriates, people from America, but also England and so on, who are in Paris because of the fun. And there's actually, after the war, the cost of living was low, and people went to Paris because they could live cheaply. And of course, there was no prohibition in Paris. And so they left the United States in part to escape prohibition. The book has two famous epigraphs. These are quotes at the beginning of the book. One is from Gertrude Stein. She said to Hemingway, "You are all a lost generation. You're all a lost generation." And the other one is from Ecclesiastes. And it goes, "Oh, one generation passes, another comes, but the earth abides forever. The sun also rises, and the sun goes down and returns to the place where it arose. All the rivers run into the sea," and so on. There's some of that, indicating the cyclical nature of life. There's also the famous phrase, which is not in the book, not used as the epigraph, but it's from Ecclesiastes. It's a conflation of Ecclesiastes and the book of Isaiah. And it is, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die." That could be the motto of this book. When I teach this book to freshmen at Wofford, I usually send them off on the first day and say, "Go read the first 30 pages and we'll see you, Wednesday." And they go and they come back and they're all kind of perplexed. They're like, "Really? This is what this book is about? These are like college kids. All they do is eat and drink and be merry." And I say, exactly. And we go from there. So is that true? Is this book, which we are saying is one of the more important books of American literature, is it really just about that? And of course, I would have to say, no, it's not. It's also about war, and it's about how, and the aftermath of war, and about how war destroys the principles by which people live. And World War I certainly did that. It was a shocking event. It was the war to end all wars. And of course, it didn't end all wars at all. But it certainly upset the status quo. It upset the way people thought about their lives. The action begins in Paris in the early to mid-20s. Hemingway went to Paris, went to Pamplona, as I said, and his main visit to Paris, the visit about which this book is written, was in 1925. So Hemingway's writing about a trip he made to Paris in 1925, and he's writing about his friends. And you can identify all of them, almost all of them. But Brett Ashley is, for example, a woman named Duff Twisden, and Robert Cohn is Harold Loeb, and so on. I won't go on and on about that. But it's about Jake primarily, and Jake has been wounded. One of the key theories of fiction, which Hemingway made famous, is what he called the iceberg theory. He says, when I write, 7/8 of it is under the surface. I only show you 1/8. And I try to keep, it's not just because I'm trying to hide everything, but I want to suggest things, and I want you to dig for them, and I want you to think about things. And so Hemingway was writing that. And so he didn't tell us everything about Jake. But we learn eventually that Jake is wounded, and seriously. And he's lost the love of his life, who was Brett Ashley. Brett Ashley, who pops up in the book, was in the past Jake's lover. And we find out about that, and we feel, of course, how they were separated and now they're back. But that's sort of what the book is about. It also happens to be about Brett being promiscuous. She has lots of lovers, and Jake is only one of them and not a current one. There's a quote I'm going to read to you, to give you a taste of this. I'm going to try to read a good bit from The Sun Also Rises and Farewell to Arms. But this scene I mentioned because it reveals Jake's fragility, but it also foretells some of A Farewell to Arms. It's a scene that is sort of repeated in A Farewell to Arms, where Jake is in the hospital and he's visited by a liaison officer who, in A Farewell to Arms, is a good friend of his who's a combat surgeon. But anyway, Hemingway writes, "That was funny. That was about the first funny thing. I was all bandaged up, but they had told the officer about it. Then he made that wonderful speech. You, a foreigner, an Englishman, have given more than your life." What a speech. I would have liked to have had it illuminated to hang in the office. He never laughed. He was putting himself in my place, I suppose. "Que mala fortuna, que mala fortuna." What bad luck, he says. Well, I never would have had any trouble if I hadn't run into Brett when they shipped me to England. I suppose she only wanted what she couldn't have. Well, people were like that. To hell with people. Catholic Church had an awfully good way of handling all that. Good advice, anyway. Not to think about it. Oh, it was swell advice. Try and take it sometime. Try and take it. Then all of a sudden, I started to cry. But Jake, this tough soldier, is in his room alone in Pamplona, having been with Brett, having been unsuccessful in getting her to commit anything to him. And he's alone in his room and he starts to cry. Jake plans, another son of Hemingway, Jake plans a fishing trip to the borderland area between France and Spain. And he wants to go to the Irati River, which is one of his favorite fishing places. And he invites his friends. He invites all of them, but ends up only one of them goes with him. Turns out to be Bill. For several days, they have a wonderful time drinking, enjoying the camaraderie, admiring the sun sparkling on the grass and on the water. They catch big fish. They return to their hotel and eat fine meals. They drink more. They sleep under warm blankets on cool nights. And then they join the others in Pamplona, including Brett's fiance, Mike, Brett's former lover, Robert, and, also Pedro Romero, the young, handsome, talented 18-year-old bullfighter who's the talk of the town and whom Brett picks to be in her corral. What could go wrong? The owner of the hotel, Montoya, where they're staying in Pamplona, his name is Montoya, is a good friend of Jake's. They are both aficionados, means passionate fans of the bullfights. And they talk about bullfights and bullfighters all the time together. He says to Jake at one time, there's an American down here, an American woman down here. He's talking in Spanish, of course. There's an American woman down here who collects bullfighters. So he asked Jake to take care of Romero and not let him get spoiled by the other Americans here. And Jake, of course, agrees. This is the right thing to do to protect Romero. But just later that day, we have a scene where Jake is in the bar with Romero. Montoya has introduced them, and they're talking about bullfights, even in Spanish, because Jake speaks Spanish, but Romero knows some English also. And Brett comes in, and she sits down, and she watches them for a while, and then she says to Jake, Jake, you might introduce your friends. And she keeps her eye on Romero. And so he asks them to come over, asks them if they want to come over and have some coffee, share some coffee with him. And they do. Romero and Jake and some others go over and join the Americans. And just then, Montoya walks into the room. And he smiles at Jake, and then he sees that there's Jake next to Romero, who has a big glass of cognac in his hand, and he's sitting next to a woman with bare shoulders, an attractive woman with bare shoulders. And he doesn't smile or even nod at Jake. He just walks out. Jake has betrayed his friend, Montoya, by doing that, by introducing Brett and Romero like that. Later, not much later, all Brett has to do is say, do you still love me, Jake? Yes, because I'm a goner, Brett says. How? I'm mad about the Romero boy. I'm in love with him, I think. I wouldn't be if I were you, Jake says. I can't help it, I'm a goner. I just can't stay tight all the time. No. Oh, darling, please stay by me. Please stay by me and see me through this. Sure. I don't say it's right. It's right for me, though. God knows I've never felt such a bitch. What do you want me to do? Come on, let's go find him. And they do. Jake takes him and finds Romero, and they go out together. The next day, Robert calls Jake a pimp, which he is. Jake tries to hit him, and Robert, who was a boxing champion at Princeton, knocks him out. And Mike too, by the way. And then the next day, he beats up Romero, who has to fight a bull in the morning. So Robert, in this little furious spree, beats up his friends and almost causes the death of one of Spain's most important bullfighters. So we're just about, at this point in the book, we're just about sick of these expatriates. Especially, we don't want to put Brett on our Christmas list. But we find out right around that time that Brett lost her lover, her fiance of 8 years in the war. And then, on a rebound from that loss, she married another soldier, a sailor. And this man made her sleep on the floor, and he slept with a service revolver, a loaded service revolver, And she had to get up every night after he fell asleep and take the bullets out. So you see, the war has affected all of them. Even Brett, whom we try not to like her, but you see what she's got going on in her life, and you have some sympathy for her. I end up liking Brett. I end up having a lot of sympathy and liking her a lot because she's promiscuous and she hurts these men, especially Jake. But she's honest in a way that the others are not. The fiesta ends, thank God. The friends go their separate ways. Brett goes off with Romero. Jake goes to the beach at San Sebastian for a vacation from his vacation. He's healing slowly for a few days, and then he gets a telegram from Brett, who's in Madrid, and she needs help. She says, "Will you come and help me?" He says, "Of course I will." So he goes to Madrid, goes to the hotel where she is. They sit, and she says, "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it." And then she talks about it for an hour. Nonstop, she talks about Romero. She tells him that Romero wanted her to marry him, to grow her hair out long and become a proper señora, because the short hair wasn't going to cut it in Spain. But for the first time in the novel, she is unselfish, and she sends him away. She says, "You know, I feel rather damn good, Jake." "You should. You know, it makes one feel rather good deciding not to be a bitch." "Yes. It's sort of what we have instead of God." "Well, some people have God," Jake says. "Quite a lot." "He never worked very well for me," Brett says. I love that dialogue. And that's one of the things that Hemingway is good at, is realistic, tough, accurate dialogue. And I love it. I love the dialogue of Sun Also Rises. There's a little bit more I'll get to in a minute. Jake takes her to dinner where he drinks, after 3 martinis, most of 5 bottles of wine. I counted. She says, "Don't get drunk, Jake. You don't have to." He says, "How do you know?" She says, "Don't get drunk. You'll be all right." He says, "You want to go for a ride?" She says, "Sure." And so they do. They go outside, they get in a taxi, and they ride, probably an open-air taxi, a carriage kind of taxi. And they take a ride on the Gran Via around downtown Madrid. And then here's the quote, quoting from the end of the book, Sun Also Rises. "The driver started up the street. I settled back. Brett moved close to me. We sat close against each other. I put my arm around her, and she rested against me comfortably. It was very hot and bright, and the houses looked sharply white. We turned onto the Gran Via. Oh, Jake," Brett said, "we could have had such a damn good time together." Ahead was a mounted policeman in khaki directing traffic. He raised his baton. The car slowed, suddenly pressing Brett against me. "Yes," I said. "Isn't it pretty to think so?" I think that's beautiful. It's wistful. It's yearning for what you can't have. That's what this book is about, in part, as well as being about the war, of course. It's about that human yearning. The answer, though, of course, is, for Jake, no. We couldn't have had such a damn good time. He says, "Isn't it pretty to think so?" Meaning, no, we couldn't have had a damn good time, even if I wasn't wounded, because you're you. You're the way you are. and we could never be together. And we have proven that in our lives. And here, our book is over. The book was an immediate success, had some great reviews, some bad reviews, sold well, but not spectacularly. But it established Hemingway as the real thing, one of the best up-and-coming writers in America. And he started being mentioned with people like F. Scott Fitzgerald. And Fitzgerald noticed, Fitzgerald met Hemingway, liked him, said, hey, you want me to read some of your book? He met Hemingway before he published Sun Also Rises. He said, you want me to read your book? Hemingway said, sure, if you would. Fitzgerald read it, made some really good criticism, wrote him a long letter, 20-page letter with criticism in it, and Hemingway took most of the advice. He cut the beginning, although I don't think he found the right beginning. I still think that Hemingway's Sun Also Rises doesn't start in the right place, but who am I to criticize Hemingway, right? But anyway, later he denied that Fitzgerald helped him. And that was one of the least appealing characteristics of Ernest Hemingway, is that he didn't give people credit for helping him because he wanted it to have all been him. At that time, or about just right after the publication of Sun Also Rises, another woman appears in their life. Her name is Pauline Pfeiffer. She's a stylish, young, lovely woman who is also an heiress. And she befriends both of the Hemingways. She's a friend to Hadley as well as to Ernest. And she sort of moves in with them. She goes on trips with them and stuff, and she's just she inserts herself into the family. And not long thereafter, she has stolen Hemingway from Hadley, and she marries him. She becomes Mrs. Hemingway number 2. They leave France. They leave Hadley behind. They go to Key West, and Hemingway starts writing his second novel, A Farewell to Arms. Many people like to read the opening paragraph of the novel, Farewell to Arms, because it's a fine example of Hemingway's lovely, mellifluous, cadenced prose style. So here it is, the first paragraph. In the late summer of that year, we lived in a house in a village that looked across the river and the plain to the mountains. In the bed of the river, there were pebbles and boulders, dry and white in the sun, and the water was clear and swiftly moving and blue in the channels. Troops went by the house and down the road, and the dust they raised powdered the leaves of the trees. The trunks of the trees, too, were dusty, and the leaves fell early that year, and we saw the troops marching along the road, and the dust rising, and leaves stirred by the breeze. The leaves falling, and the soldiers marching, and afterward the road bare and white except for the leaves. Later, the book is filled with rain. Rain becomes one of the dominant metaphors and images in the book. Anyway, early in the book, during a quiet period at the front, the main character, Lieutenant Frederick Henry, an American volunteer like Hemingway, except that he's older and more important to the war effort and active in the war. He meets the nurse, Catherine Barclay. She tells him that her fiancé died in the war. She tells him the story of how they had gone off to war together. And she had a kind of a romantic notion that, he would be wounded. He might have like a saber cut. And he would come to the hospital and she would fix it for him. And they would be able to see each other and be together like that. She says to Frederick Henry, he didn't have a saber cut. They blew him all to bits. This is one of the things about war, of course. It can't be romanticized. If you're naive and think it's going to be romantic in any way or pretty in any way or whatever, you're going to be profoundly disappointed when you see how grim it is. And that's what happened to Catherine Barclay. In their first couple of meetings, their relationship is strange. He's pushy. He just wants one thing from her. She holds him back, but at the same time, she says to him, she talks to him like this. She says, "Oh, darling, you will be good to me, won't you?" And the next time they meet, she says, "And you did say you loved me, didn't you?" And he says, he lies. He says in the book, "I lied and said yes." And then he says, "I thought she was a little crazy." Because she's acting a little crazy the second time they meet, say, "And you did say you loved me, didn't you?" And so on. But then they talk, they continue to talk, and she says, "Oh, never mind, I'm just playing a game. And you know, you're playing a game too, we're playing it together, and it's going to be all right," and it is all right. And they get along well. They haven't fallen in love or anything, but they're getting along just fine. But he has to go to work. He has to go to the front lines and be an ambulance driver. And one day he's sitting in a trench eating cheese with some of his co-workers, ambulance co-workers, when a mortar explodes nearby, as happened to Hemingway. He writes, "I went out swiftly, all of myself, and I knew I was dead, and it had all been a mistake to think that you just died. Then I floated, and instead of going on, I felt myself slide back. I breathed, and I was back. The war has become painfully real," to Frederick Henry. Like Hemingway, Frederick Henry suffers serious wounds in his legs. He's in the hospital for a good while. He's visited by his devoted, funny friend, Rinaldi, who's like the man who made the speech, "You a foreigner." He talks about getting Frederick Henry a medal. "I'm going to get you a medal." And Frederick Henry says, "I didn't do anything. I was just eating cheese." He says, "It doesn't matter. Surely you carried someone out of the war or something." He says, "No." He says, "Oh, it doesn't matter. We'll get you a medal anyway." And he does. But he also sees Catherine and spends a lot of time with Catherine as he recuperates. She tends to him, and they have like a month together, and then he goes on leave because he has leave for recuperation purposes. And they spend another time together. So they spend almost like a whole summer together, falling in love. And now it's the real thing. And finally, though, he's discharged and sent back to the front because he's still a soldier in the war, and the war is active. Again, Germans and Austrians attacking the Italians. This is the famous Battle of Caporetto, which happened in the fall of 1917, and it was a tremendous disaster for the Italian army. The Germans and Austrians broke through the lines, the front lines, and slaughtered thousands of Italians and pushed them back. And people like Frederick Henry and the ambulances and so on just had to retreat. All of the Italians retreated. He says the whole country was retreating because they did. Civilians went with the soldiers, and they took their livestock and their chickens and so on, and they all got in a line, and they clogged the streets trying to get away from the war. This is in book 3, and everybody, even soldiers who had been in the war, who had been there. Hemingway had not been there, but he made this up and he created this. All of the experts said Hemingway got it right, down to the smallest details. The sound of trench mortars, the sight of ambulances stuck in the mud, Everything he got it right. Are you needing to talk to me?
We have time for the audience to ask questions.
Yes, yes.
So if you can finish up in the next few minutes, we'll be good to go.
Thank you so much, because actually, I wasn't looking at my watch, and I've gone an hour, haven't I? Thank you for interrupting me.
Sure.
Okay, let me read this paragraph. I'll kind of stop with this. This is one of the most important paragraphs in Hemingway's work, and it comes from A Farewell to Arms. I was always embarrassed by the words sacred, glorious, and sacrifice, and the expression in vain. We had heard them, sometimes standing in the train almost out of earshot, so that only the shouted words came through, and had read them on proclamations that were slapped up by bill posters over other proclamations. And I had seen nothing sacred, and the things that were glorious had no glory. And the sacrifices were like the stockyards in Chicago, if nothing was done with the meat except to bury it. There were many words that you could not stand to hear, and finally, only the names of places had dignity. Certain numbers were the same way, and certain dates, and these were the names and places where all you could say, and the names and places were all you could say and have them mean anything. Abstract words such as glory, honor, courage, or hallow were obscene beside the concrete names of villages, the numbers of roads, the names of rivers, the numbers of regiments, and the dates. Okay, I will have to stop there. I'm sorry, I didn't get to finish. I timed this, of course, and my timing at home was completely wrong, was completely different from the timing tonight.
Thank you very much. Like I said, this is an important part of Chautauqua where we ask questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
yes.
I am sure there are several questions you will have from this.
I hope I'll have some
audience of ours.
questions.
I will actually start you with a question. As a longtime high school English teacher, why do you think it is that over the years, as we've read The Old Man and the Sea, which is very commonly read in high school,
Yeah.
that I have never had a boy who didn't like The Old Man and the Sea, and I've only had one girl who ever liked The Old Man and the Sea. Why do you think there's that divide?
Me? No, this is, no.
Yeah. So why do you think it is that,
Okay, well, obviously, the first answer, of course, is that the males are more likely to be fishermen, to fish. And this is, The Old Man and the Sea is about fishing. But it's also got two male characters. There's an old man and there's a boy. And it's about a physical challenge of going out in a boat and trying to catch a big fish and doing it. And the wonderful feeling of accomplishment when you would do something like that, which I would suggest males are more likely to have experience of than the women. Certainly when it comes to fishing, deep sea fishing and so on. Am I right? Y'all tell me.
how many of the ladies here have read Old Man and the Sea and you thought it was really good? You just loved it. So 3, 4, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many of the guys here have read Old Man and the Sea? Very few. How many of those who read it liked it? They really liked it. So a little better percentage still. Okay. I just wondered about that because over the years.
Good.
Other questions about, yes, right over here. Hold on. Here I come.
I'd like to hear more about his wives.
Okay.
I guess you mentioned number 2, but I want to know about 3 and 4.
I'll try to do it quickly. Not that I'm an expert about them. You can certainly find out information in the biographies and so on. And these biographies talk about them. But Hadley was older than Hemingway, just as Brett was older and so on. Brett, by the way, is 34 years old, and she goes after an 18-year-old bullfighter. But anyway, Hadley was about 8 years older than Hemingway. She was very solid. She was a good girl, raised in a good family, a troubled family. Her mother had recently committed suicide. But she was very solid and steady and loved Hemingway and was dedicated and devoted to him and their son, John Bumby. And Hemingway, throughout his life, thought back to Hadley with great affection and thought one time, you know, if only I hadn't met her, the woman who was the best woman for me of all at the beginning. You know, because I didn't know what else was out there. And so when Pauline came along and the others, my head was turned by the other women. Pauline was very pretty. Hemingway was always attracted to pretty women. Of course, he had lots of women around him, and sometimes they threw themselves at her. Pauline was, as I said, an heiress, so she had money. She could take them on trips. She could take the boys, and although she wasn't much of a mother, Pauline did not like to stay at home and be a mother to Bumby, the first boy, and then to her own. She had two boys of her own. Hemingway, as was always the case, for all four of the wives, another woman would sort of catch his eye, and he'd start to kind of lose interest in his wife and start, you know, doing things and getting to know the new women. And that happened with Pauline, and eventually he left her. The next one was Martha Gellhorn, and she was a journalist in her own right and was very much a strong woman with her own career. And she finally just got sick of all the crap that he pulled and stuff. And that happened. Finally, they divorced, and Hemingway, they went to World War II together to the Spanish Civil War. Martha Gellhorn and Hemingway both went to cover the Spanish Civil War. And Hemingway then, of course, wrote a novel about it. But Martha was a journalist and sent stories back to her papers and so on. So she was actively participating in the war as much as Hemingway was. And finally just got tired of him demanding things of her when she had her own life. One time she was, the two of them were going to somewhere in Europe, and he got there before she did and met Mary Welsh, wife number 4, and liked her. They went out together, and then when Martha came, there was a time, several years, when he had both of them, sort of, and he liked to do that. He liked to have more than one woman if he could, and sometimes he managed it. But they all, in the end, got tired of him because he was very demanding, and he was an alcoholic. And when he got drunk, he could be very mean. And he hit a couple of his wives. He struck them. But they just wouldn't put up with it in the end. Although Mary Welsh, the last one, she stayed till the end. She was with him till the end when, at age 61, he committed suicide in Ketchum, Idaho. Is that enough? Okay.
And a question right here in the middle.
So when you were, is this on? Yeah. Okay. So when you were talking about his work, you named the 4 novels, but he has, doesn't he, some very strong short stories?
He sure does.
The Macabre one particularly.
The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber. It's a great story.
It's a great story, so I don't think we should leave that out.
Okay, I mentioned the books of short stories, but you're right. I did not mention him writing short stories, but he was a fantastic short story writer. You are absolutely right, and thank you for bringing that up. That story, The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber, and the story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, are terrific, powerful. And One of my favorite stories is a story called Indian Camp, which appeared in his first book. And he was just a boy. It was a remarkable story. It was about a boy who goes with his father and to visit Indian camps to help them. His father's a doctor. And the father goes to an Indian camp and gives a woman an abortion using a jackknife. And the boy watches it. And then he talks to his father and says things like, well, Daddy, do all women have this? He says, no, son. And, well, do men ever have this? No. And he just asks these innocent questions of his father, and it's very touching and moving and powerful. And there are others like it. But thank you.
And raise your hand if you have another question somewhere.
Did you have one?
Question?
Anywhere back here? Anywhere? Any other questions?
Questions?
You've seen all of these people, right? This is probably Mary Welsh. They went obviously hunting together. This is a critic, Hotchner, who has a book back there on the table. There's Hemingway with, that could be the actress Marlene Dietrich. They were good friends for a while.
You have a question in the back.
Pardon?
There's a question over there.
Thank you. You mentioned this a little bit about her, but I was wondering if you could say something about Gertrude Stein and the community she kind of created in Paris. I was always kind of interested in that.
Good. Gertrude Stein was an American writer who had a salon in Paris. A salon meaning a place where writers and artists would come to visit and to talk and to share their ideas. And it was a very active, supportive group. And Gertrude Stein had the most important salon in Paris, where she had writers like Hemingway and Fitzgerald and others, Joyce, and so on. But she also had artists, Cézanne, Picasso, and the musician Stravinsky. The leading artists of the day went to Gertrude Stein's salon, where they could meet, and of course she would feed them and give them drink and so on. And it was a very influential place, and many artists found inspiration there. And she was the key to it. Gertrude Stein was a writer in her own right. I don't personally like her writing very much. You're shaking your head. It's very experimental, odd writing. But she was right to tell Hemingway, write a true sentence. And she also is the one who suggested that he go to the bullfights. He was looking around for ideas, for stories. He hadn't written a novel, and he knew he needed to write a novel. These little vignettes that he was writing weren't going to sell, and they weren't going to make him the great writer that he wanted to be. He was very ambitious, and from the time he was a boy, he wanted to be a great writer. And he needed a story for a novel, and she said, go see the bullfights. And she sent him to Pamplona.
Why did he leave Cuba?
Well, eventually he left because Castro came. He was in Cuba for on and off for a while. He lived in Key West, but sometimes he'd just have to get away from his wife or whatever was happening, and he'd take this boat. He had a boat that he had built called the Pilar, and he'd take it to Cuba, and he'd do some deep sea fishing and so on. But he eventually had a house there, the Finca. Have you been there? Yeah, you've been to the Finca, great. That was bought for him and Pauline by Pauline's rich Uncle Gus. They liked it very much. They were very happy there. But Castro came. Hemingway was not there when the revolutionaries swept into the neighborhood, but they took over, and Hemingway lost it all. He lost his home. He lost his books. He lost his boat. He lost all of his property. And this was, around in the late 50s. That's, I guess, my best answer.
And any other questions? And any other questions for
Yes,
or
ma'am.
about
Right
him?
there.
Yes, right over there. She's coming to you with the microphone.
So glad.
How did Gertrude Stein support all the salon eating, drinking, support? I know she bought some of Picasso's pictures. Was she from a wealthy family?
She had some money, but she also had a wealthy girlfriend, Alice Bitoklis. That's what I remember. I could be wrong, but Gertrude had some money of her own. But that's a good question, and a question that I ask all the time. How did they make a living? How did this person make a living? How did this person make a living? Because sometimes writers give you that information, and sometimes they don't. And I'm not sure. I will look that up. But you could Google it. Was Gertrude Stein wealthy?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Dr.
Thank you.
Dino Tracus.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
And tonight we do not have to put the chairs away. So you are all set. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Remember, if you can spread the word about Chautauqua, the winter events, or as they're coming up, the summer events, we encourage you to do that. Also, if you have an opportunity, if you ever do things like TripAdvisor and things like that where they review things that are going on in the community, we encourage you to do those reviews. The more people who do reviews, the better chance it will be of the word spreading about Chautauqua. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.